Hello, how's it going? This is our Universal Remedies Network Plan by Kobe Moulton and Christina Bradshaw. So, for this, we have this amazing topology to work with. And in this topology, we have a few things of note that will be interesting to the company and to the campus that will be adopting this plan. So, the first interesting part are the guest routers, those being the office router and as well as the guest laboratory router. These will be used to provide network access to guests that will be visiting the premises, and these will be a wireless one to allow for the many guests that will arrive. For this to work, the wireless routers will have many connection points and would be configured in a similar manner as you would see within a campus. For example, this wonderful BYU campus that I attend has many classrooms, but you can still access the internet through them. In a similar manner, these two guest networks will allow for guests to connect to the internet through them without interfering with the internal network that the rest of this topology represents. So, starting from the top and going down and following the lines, we have the main routers of the office and the laboratory. These connect to the outside and would be connected to another wide area network to allow for communication back to the main office. That would allow for further communications to the other offices, and by doing so can find information that is specific to this company and is needed to run the rest of this network and get information that is needed. So, going from the left office router, if we go down, there is a distribution switch that is connected to. This distribution switch will carry the information that the router gets to the access switches that are, in essence, an access to the different virtual networks, or VLANs as they are called. The first VLAN we have is the admin one. This has many ports still open that can be used to interface with the admin VLAN, and through that the main leaders and authority in the campus can work and stay on their own network but still communicate with the rest of the internal network. The next VLAN is the staff, and they are connected on VLAN 20. They are followed by VLANs 30, 50, and 40. That was out of order, but it won't matter on the network a whole lot. So the staff network, all of these networks actually, are in subnet mask 28, and that will allow for the networks to have plenty of room for growth, at least 50%, and ideally double the amount can still get on, up to 14 total people can join one VLAN. And with the numbers that we are starting with, the amounts needed can fill in just one access switch by itself and still have room left over to spare. And the networks are addressed in a way that is easy to scale up from, for example, 192.168.100.4 with a subnet mask of 28 is part of the 100 or VLAN 10. Similarly, VLAN 20 has 110, and so on. Now, with this, all of the office VLANs are connected to the office distribution switch, and from that to the office router. And from that, they have a connection to the lab router. And the lab router is the connection point to the laboratory, and it has a respective lab distribution switch as well. From there, the admin distro will connect to the only VLAN, which is the leadership or administration VLAN, which is VLAN 60. And here we switch to a 200 scheme to represent a new building. And these two routers would be connected ideally through a physical connection between the two buildings, and this could run underground and would last for a while and allow for both buildings to communicate and stay on their own internal network as well. For the guest network on the laboratory side, there are network drop locations that are allowed for guests to use, and this would allow guests to access this network, but within a more controlled environment that would make sure that they can't interact too much with the internal network in a way that would compromise the running systems. The main thing of note for the laboratory side is in another internal network for the operations lab located on the bottom right side of the screen, and where the hopefully mouse is drawing circles around it. And here there are 3 switches, and these switches all have 2 ports taken up to connect to each other, but they all each still have 13 to 14 ports still open, which it is 13 ports, and that allows for 39 network drops to be available for the operations lab. This allows for the operations lab to have many access points that can communicate with each other through its own network, and within there are another 2 switches nearby that will provide more network drops that will not connect to the operations lab network, but will connect to the rest of the network. And this would follow the specifications outlined for the office and what is needed to provide for the lab to function correctly. If there are questions about this topology or more information is wanted, then feel free to leave a comment and we will address it later. So, for the naming scheme, there are a few things that you may have noticed from the topology, but for example, there's a little tag on some of the distribution or access switches, and that is an easy way for future switches and other devices to be addressed in a way that is clear and recognizable. For example, if we go back, the guest networks have an OR or an LR for office router or laboratory router, and the same goes for the distribution switches having office or lab in front of it, an O or an L in similar cases. This allows for easy scalability and lets the campus provide ways to have its own new devices attached to it in a way that can be easily addressed and corrected. And the VLANs are named to represent their respective networks and who will be using it. So the staff, the admins, and the IT sector and the training sections, they all have their own VLANs, and that convention can be followed for new ones added on. So, for the network to be built, there are a few things that need to be taken into consideration. The first is the materials, and following that, naturally, is the cost of those materials and how it will be finally secured and made sure to be protected in a way that will keep the company's and campus's assets secure and unable to be tampered with. So first is the materials. And from the topology you could see there are a few things that are needed. The first being the core routers that will be used to communicate, the switches that will be used to transport information for the internal network, and the cables and wires that will be the pathways or streets of the whole network and allow for the communication to happen. Lastly, there is the wide area network capabilities and the technology needed to carry the information and technology from the campus and laboratory all the way to the main office. And finally, the security measures to make sure this stays secure. And most of these materials can be provided by Cisco. And if you would want to have an argument of why that is a good thing, it is known to be the main type of switch, and this allows for easy maintenance and troubleshooting if there are problems, as it is a well-known network device provider. It can be used by many people. For the cost, it can range around from to install the whole thing to around $80,000, and this would include the materials, the labor, and the whole general installation needed to do this project. And to keep it going, you will need to pay the workers, and as the maintenance cost is going to be included here, it is a large price, but that also comes with the knowledge that having this network will be performing well and last for a while, and with the right maintenance it could even go down. For the security concerns, there are open ports and a public network and an internal network that we have to worry about. For the open ports, port security can be used to make sure that whenever it's used, only the right addresses or right devices are recognized, and it will not take in traffic or things that shouldn't be there. For the public access, the hope is the public networks provided will allow for the guests to fully communicate with the outside world and parts of the internal network as needed. This would allow for effective communications between just the internal network and, if needed, the guest network as well. And the internal network should be by itself, and from the VLANs and other control, you will be able to talk to the devices from the network by itself. Sorry about that, but continuing on. The public access is also, we've mentioned this, so we will move on from this part. And, oh, yes, I mentioned this as well, but the security, this is how it will be done. So, yeah, just take time to read this part. And if there's other questions, feel free to leave any questions or concerns about it. And we are thankful for your choice in this network design, and we hope you have a fantastic day.